Samir, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks so much.
After the Blue and Gold Summit, Samir was a little bit delayed getting there, sponsored big part of the event, so we're incredibly grateful. But after the event, everyone was like, we need to hear from Samir and more from Trophy Point. So it's just like a dream come true to have you on this Friday. So, Joffrey, why don't we kick it off with just some background with Samir?
Yeah, definitely. So, Samir, tell us a little bit about yourself. Unfortunately, you're a West Point grad. We won't hold that against you. but
Thank you.
tell the goats a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive right into it.
Yes, I would say I've sort of had a dual career my entire adult life. Obviously, West Point and then the Army. But I've always been entrepreneurial on the weekends and on the evenings. And then obviously had my day job in the Army um, right after graduation. So I bought my first hotel when I was a cadet at the academy. And then when I went to Fort Lewis, my first duty station, I was flipping houses. I bought a debt collection company that was collecting debt on behalf of HOA associations, homeowners associations. And I've always been tangentially related to real estate in anything I've done pretty much over the last 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've, and the good thing about real estate and knowledge in general is that the knowledge is cumulative. So like what I did in one project or one deal 4 or 5 years ago comes back and helps me out on a second deal or third deal in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
And I've
sorry.
always,
Did you say that you bought your first hotel as a cadet?
Yeah, we
yeah,
got to
yeah,
rewind.
I'm
You
sorry.
cannot speed past
What?
that.
Could we just rewind back to that? Because I was just figuring out how to try to salute, and you're buying hotels.
yeah. So I'll say this: like I did well academically at West Point the first year, 2 years, but I felt something was lacking. I didn't want my life to be, to be based on how well I did on chemistry tests, and I just needed more. And I knew early on that buying assets and building assets and acquiring assets is the way to get rich. There's a difference between building wealth and building and making money.
Mm-hmm.
And really, you want to index on building wealth, right? And wealth comes through the acquisition of assets that just continually feed you cash flow. So I kind of understood that concept early on. And then I was just asking around, and believe it or not, you guys may like this. The hotel I bought was right outside the Great Lakes Naval Training Center, which,
Oh,
as you
let's go.
know,
Yep.
is the Navy's only boot camp. So
Yeah.
at a very early age, I was able to link my military sort of knowledge. Like I knew boot camps means 200 to 300 sailors or service people graduating every year, every week. That means 4 to 5 family members coming in every week for graduations. Like this got 1,000, 2,000 people coming in and out of that area every week, every couple of weeks. And so I was able to leverage that to make a case for buying this hotel. And
Whoa.
I'm glad I did because it saved us because I bought that hotel in '07 when I was a junior.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't make any money for 5 years because '08, '09 hit. And back then, surviving was the name of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And my military sort of thesis around acquiring that hotel is what saved us when other budget hotels, went under or were foreclosed on.
And I don't want to
How'd you
distract.
structure that deal? How'd you structure
Yeah.
that deal?
Yeah. So the first thing was, I had help, right? I had a mentor, a friend of my father's actually, that was more into hotels. My dad was an IBM corporate guy, so there wasn't any real help on that side. But I found a mentor. I made my case to him on why I think it's a great deal. The couple that owned it was divorcing, so there was also that kind of advantage. Like there's an urgency to sell as well. And so we basically raised, 20% equity and then got the rest in the form of an SBA loan, actually. And SBA loans work really well with operating properties like hotels because there's a business component to it and there's also a real estate component to it, which would make excellent, at least in 2007, excellent sort of criteria for a bank to lend on. And so
Mm-hmm.
we only had to raise actually 20% equity on a $1.5 million property purchase price, which is only 300,000, which may seem like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of real estate, it's not. You just need to find 7 to 10 people with $50,000, $100,000 checks, which is not that hard actually if you really put your mind to it, and you make a good case for why it's a good deal. And so I went through that process as well, of raising the money and understanding what it takes to raise capital,
Mm-hmm.
equity wise. And then we solved the bank debt problem through the SBA loan, and we bought it. And that process took about 6 months.
Okay, so you were doing well academically, but what gave you the confidence to do something like that? I mean, were you born like that? Was it the way you were raised by your parents? That takes a confident person to do that.
I'm not sure confidence played into that. I think I knew I deserved to own assets and I knew I deserved to do big things, and taking risks is part of that. And my mindset at the academy was I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn how to take sensible risks, and I'm ultimately here to be a leader as best as I can be. And so I've got to do things that put me in a position to lead, to take risks, to lead, and to make things happen. And so buying the hotel was a much better use of my time, I felt, than the bullshit that is, academy life, which is, class, you know, brigade stuff as you guys call it. Like I just was not I'm not gonna do that. Like it's just a waste of time, to be honest. I want to like really learn how to get stuff going. And so I spent my graduation leave after I graduated at my hotel. Like a lot of guys are on vacations and stuff like that. I spent my leave while I was in the military checking on my hotel. And the first dead body I ever saw before my Iraq and Afghanistan deployments was at the hotel actually. Somebody
Oh,
overdosed on
God.
drugs, and so I was like learning how to like handle problems, and that's where I wanted to be. Like if you want to be a leader, you have to have a mindset of not necessarily avoiding problems, but being willing to solve problems that no one else can solve. Because that's what makes the difference between the leaders and the folks that aren't. I
Did
would
you
argue
tell
it's
did you tell all your classmates you were working on this, or did you keep it under wraps? Because I feel like these days on social media, it's like tell everybody what you're doing all the time. But
Yeah.
back then, like, did you share with your classmates all of that?
just one or two, like just only a handful of folks, like in my sort of inner circle in my company and a good friend. I was not really interested in broadcasting that because honestly, I didn't know where this was going to go, and I just felt like it was just better I just not talk about it unless that classmate I knew had an interest in real estate in which we could tangibly talk about something.
You said something really interesting that I'd love to flesh out a little bit. You said I deserve to do big things. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I cannot remember when I came to this realization, but we all go through this process of like, do I believe in myself to to go do big things? And I don't think that's a logical way to go about it. How can you believe in yourself if you've never done XYZ thing, right?
Mm.
It's hard, right? Like I have a disconnect with that. Like I don't know if I can believe in myself in a lot of things because I've never done it before. So what basis do I have to truly actually understand and believe what I'm supposed to be doing? But I'll tell you this, I do know what I deserve. And so I believe in what I deserve, and I'm going to work on that basis on what I believe I deserve. And come what may, with the risks, the problems, the setbacks, whatever. But I know I deserve to be rich. I know I deserve to have assets, and I know I deserve to be a good leader, right? And I operate with that mindset, and that's largely helped me out
Wow.
overcoming lack of confidence issues.
That is
That,
awesome. Snip
that is
that.
awesome.
And we can, yeah, that is such great advice for current midshipmen and people that just graduated because so much, at least when I was a midshipman, I feel like my confidence eroded a good bit because so many people around you are excellent at so many things. And I think most of us, were brought to an academy and we were, usually performing at the top of our class. It's, maybe not academically, but sort of whole package wise. And then you're surrounded by a group of successful people and it can be a little bit of like imposter syndrome feeling. But okay, so I'm glad we touched on that. Can you sort of walk us through? So you go into the Army. Did you continue focusing on real estate stuff as aggressively, or did you dedicate, all of your brain to military development?
JD, I'm gonna hold you right there. You spoke about 2008. I love speaking about like challenges and stuff like that. How'd you overcome, the market crashing in 2008, and how'd you, essentially survive and thrive on the other end? Sorry about that, JD.
So yeah, so going back to 2008, it was a tough time for a lot of people, obviously, right? You can read about why it happened and what happened. For me, it affected me in the sense that we didn't make any profit. Thank God we had the military sort of business that kind of propped us up. And this was a days in hotel, by the way. Some of your soldiers or some of the former midshipmen or grads may know about this actually hotel. But anyway, we went through a series of management changes, very frustrating. Like, people are not in it to make you money unless they're an owner of it. And I learned that lesson early on too, that I've got to incentivize management, people actually running it day to day, to be part of the game, to be part of the profit and the loss of what happens. But '07, '08, '08, '09 was pretty bad. There were 8 budget hotels in that area. 6 of them failed, or the keys were handed back to the bank. We survived. What ended up saving me, though, during that kind of 2-year, 3-year period right after the crisis was my uncle emigrated from India, and we installed him as the management and the owner and gave him equity. And he lived there. My cousins lived there. And so then that's when things started turning around from a cost perspective and management perspective. The second thing was, in a time of crisis, you have to be willing to pick up the phone. And so one of the things that we did was we called the bank. We knew the bank was failing itself. A lot of banks failed during that time. And we made them an offer to buy out the debt. So if we owed 1.1 million on the note, we owed 1.1 million on the note. We made an offer for 600K. The guy's like, if you can pay this off in the next week, I'll sell you the note. And that's exactly what we did. We raised money from another set of investors, bought out the note from the bank, and I was able to effectively cut my debt service in half, which also allowed us to survive.
And this may be a very, very naive question, Samir, but when the financial crisis started, why was it impacting your hotel specifically? Were less people coming and booking nights because they were getting laid off from their jobs, or was the debt floating, or what was the mechanism that was actually impacting like the bottom line?
Yeah, I mean, we had to reduce rates first of all, and just to get people to come to the place. Like, so the Navy business was good, but it wasn't 90% of my revenue. It was closer to 25, 30%, a very important 30%. But the other 70 came from people that are traveling. It came from people that are coming to the Gurney Hills Mall, Six Flags over. I think Great America was nearby. So like there was a lot of other travel that we depended on to fill the rooms, and that
But
wasn't happening during the
okay,
crisis.
got it. Because I think a lot of our listeners skew younger, and so I was young during the financial crisis. I didn't have much understanding of what was causing different sectors to go, under. But thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
And for some context, Samir has a really diverse portfolio and very successful person. But for some reason, that this case study has always stood out to me as kind of a great summation of his personality. And, I know him professionally and personally, and just to picture him as a midshipman or a cadet. Sorry, bias is showing.
Don't, hey, don't downgrade me here.
We would have loved to have you, Samir. We would have loved to have you. I think it's just a really great story, and we could dive into so many of his deals, but I just love this particular story, and no one at the summit got to hear it, and it's just super cool to me. Back to you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So,
And
okay, so you bought. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, what I'd offer is for better or for worse, and I think my father encouraged risk taking a little bit. I I wish I'd taken even more risk back then, actually, because you don't understand, if you're a junior officer, junior military officer, you've got income coming in from other sources. And as long as you're not married or have a kid or other like crazy obligations family wise, those first 5 years after graduation are so critical. And I just loved the idea of making big things happen inside the platoon that I was as a platoon leader, going all in on my military training, going all in on my education on the side. Like, I didn't waste a day. I don't think I was ever bored or ever not busy, actually, during the 5 years that I was in the military. Like, every Saturday and Sunday was taken up by something. And so I would say, if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you really have to open up your mind to taking risks, and then also working through other people, right? Because there's no way I could have done all I did just by myself. Samir Patel is a solopreneur. There was always partners, there was always investors, there was always somebody else that I worked with. And I think the military, especially the Naval Academy in West Point, do a really good job of teaching this whole cooperating graduate concept. And I took that to another level on the business side.
Absolutely, absolutely. So after you purchased the hotel, And after graduation, did you go into more hotels, or did you go into commercial, residential? Would you kind of do after graduation, and when you were serving as an officer, investing wise?
The short answer is both. Um, so when you do one deal, there's something in the universe that ends up throwing more deals your way.
Mm,
Um, and the way it works out usually is I had to raise money from 7 investors. They all kind of had a real estate sort of familiarity with hotels or real estate. So then another referral comes my way for another hotel deal, and we ended up executing on that deal. And then when I was at Fort Lewis, I was literally in my apartment building, and I was in the elevator with a guy that was actually renting out closet space in the apartment building for his business, which was debt collection for HOAs. And and I'm always seeing this guy get out of the elevator and go into the closet, into the broom closet. And I guess the owner of my building was very forward thinking, who ended up becoming a good friend of mine as well. But he was renting out even the individual closet spaces in his multifamily apartment building
Wow.
to generate extra rent. So anyway, I see this guy go into this broom closet, and I'm like, I gotta meet this guy. Like, what the hell's going on in this broom closet? And he turned out he was a army veteran himself. He was a reservist, and I made friends with him. And then over the course of a year, we started looking at other deals and started flipping houses, and then also going down this debt collection path.
that's awesome. That's awesome. So, okay, you start investing in different type of properties. You get into debt collection. Then how I guess how'd you get into like Trophy Point and becoming the lender? And
So around
why'd you get
20,
into that space?
yeah. So I'll start with the last question first, actually, which is why lending. So when you're flipping houses, I flipped like 20 houses outside Fort Lewis, which
Hmm.
was really good back then because the financial crisis, you could pick up things at 50, 60, 70K, fix them up, solve some problems, and sell them for 150, 200K
Hmm.
um, a year later. And so I did that on 20 properties. And so that process also taught me to be a borrower, or for better or for worse. I was borrowing from private lenders on all that. And I realized the economics of private lending from that experience. And so I added it to my repertoire, and I ended up becoming a lender to other folks.
Yeah.
And, leading up in the mid 2010s, I was a lender to grads. Like a grad needs 100K to finish up a property or something like that. I would lend that grad 100K on a handshake, largely.
Hmm.
And then around 2015, 2016, me and my classmates, three of my classmates, we got together to syndicate our own deals and invest as a group in other people's deals.
Hmm.
And then around 2019, 2020, the requests became more frequent to to lend out money to other West Point grads, actually. So we decided to change tactics. Instead of investing as owners in real estate, we decided to become lenders because it was a much more passive game for us because we all had day jobs and other things that we were doing.
Hmm.
And since 2018, since 2019, 2020, we became a formal fund and started lending. And fast forward today, we've lent out about 160 million, and we have about 62 million under management in loans on the street right
Whoa.
now.
That's crazy.
Sheesh.
That
Joffrey and I are asking because we admire the business structure you've done, and we would kill to do it instead of getting our butts handed to us every day in residential real estate. Um,
that's a fact.
what about your classmates that were affected in the financial crash? Did anyone just get totally wiped out and just lose their desire to participate in real estate, or did it give sort of a backbone to your age group? Like, yeah, we survived this, and we can continue to excel when things get easier.
That's a good question. I actually don't know what my classmates did during the financial crisis as it pertains to real estate. I don't think I'm sure there were. We graduated about 1,000, but I don't know about myself. I mean, my classmates, my partners, they were involved in real estate after the crisis. They bought duplexes,
Mm,
townhomes, single family, and they rented them and flipped them. Dave Merrill, my partner in Trophy Point, he was actually getting into building houses and actually taking advantage of historical tax credits and stuff like that. So I think on the acquisition side, they benefited from low price points. I don't know of anyone that was exposed prior to the crisis. I think I may be the only one that I know of that was exposed and had to solve a bunch of problems during the crisis. I
It's
do
almost an
know,
advantage. It's almost an advantage that you got to experience that. Do you look back and be like, wow, I'm actually thankful I got to go through that.
yeah, very much so, right? Like I actually got a cycle under my belt because, real estate is all about the cycles and the credit cycle. And obviously 2008 was a very bad one, if not the worst one in modern times. And my little sort of spiel with folks is you've got to be able to survive the cycles. That's the true mark of a professional. And largely the wannabes and the new guys that have survived, that have been promulgating over the last 5 to 10 years, they've never had to live through a cycle. And their investment decisions are predicated on, in my opinion, my personal humble opinion, false assumptions. And we're kind of seeing that now too. Like it's starting to play out now. Like a lot of apartment syndicators that got very popular 2017, 2018, 2019, 2021, they are all getting hosed because they didn't structure their deals accordingly. I don't think they took into account the downside. I learned some painful lessons in what happens in a downturn, at least for hotels. And I guess you could extrapolate that to multifamily and maybe extrapolate that to single family. But I have a healthy respect for supply and demand and interest rates and stuff like that in a very visceral way, whereas a lot of folks these days don't. And it's not their fault. I mean, they just haven't lived through it.
Huh.
But it does matter because there'll be another cycle and there'll probably be another one after that in our lifetimes.
Yeah, that's
So I
right.
got a
Can you?
question,
Oh,
a
yeah.
selfish question. So what do you do to prepare for that? I know a lot of the multifamily guys got, stuck because rates were lower, then rates went up, and then, they were using like bridge loans, 5-year loans and stuff like that. So how do you prepare for that cycle when it comes?
Yeah, so a couple ways you can do it. So the first one is like look at the supply and demand. So let's say you're in multifamily and let's say you live in Austin, Texas, or you want to do a development in Austin, Texas,
Yeah.
especially. Like Austin has a lot of units coming online in the next 2 years, like tens of thousands of units. So that's a lot of
Whoa.
supply. And the next thing you got to do is look at the absorption and understand like, are people actually eating up these units? Like, are they being continually rented? And if there's a situation, and this also works in hotels too, and just we look at it in terms of rooms, if and vacancy rates or occupancy rates. If you're looking at a situation where like more and more supply is being added and occupancy is not increasing, now you've got a dangerous sort of combination here of excess supply. And if there's excess supply, now it tells you what's going to happen to your rents, which are essentially going to have to go down in order to be competitive, or you have to do more concessions and things like that. And then if you layer on this idea of like the timing or the duration of interest rate. So I learned a lesson, and I'm glad I did with the hotel in 2008, is that we had 10-year debt. And our rate was a little bit higher actually than what it should have been because rates came down in that particular instance because the economy needed to be restarted. And so rates came down dramatically, almost near zero. And I was still stuck with like this 10-year debt at like 6-7% actually, which was, a problem. So like, I don't know if timing is the right answer, but you have to like respect what is the duration of your interest rates and where do you think they're going to go? Like if you think interest rates are going to go down, which they more likely will go down than up, then you may not want to lock yourself into a long-term contract or long-term debt arrangement. But if you believe that interest rates are going to go up, then it may be worth spending time to get into a fixed rate contract or buy an interest rate cap, which is like basically a contract or like an option you pay extra money to your lender to cap your interest rate at a certain level. So you know that your interest rate's never going to like change on your debt service is not going to change on you long term, which is really important for you, Joffrey, if you're into the multifamily side.
Yeah.
So then you got to ask yourself, like, this interest rate dynamic, is the available cash flow that's coming out of the NOI coming out of the property, is that enough to cover this debt service in any variety of scenarios? And then, you should apply your own sort of handicap, knock off 10% of your NOI just for the sake of doing it and see what happens. And if you can do that, then you know you're kind of heading into this in a conservative way, which allows you to survive.
Gotcha.
Samir, can you explain? So imagine I'm a 10-year-old, which I essentially am. Could you walk me through a, a very good explanation or a good case study of somebody that came to Trophy Point, utilized you properly, took down a deal, and can you just walk us through like step by step kind of how that looks from your view, all that?
Yeah, I mean this happens every week. I'm proud to report that Trophy Points help create about 25 to 30 million in wealth for the military community. If you
Oh, that's
take
awesome.
if you take
That
the
is
final
awesome.
sale price on a flip property or the final appraisal minus our loan minus any equity the borrower put in, that delta is about 25 to 30 million in wealth
Wow.
created.
That's
And how
amazing.
old is it? How old is Trophy Point?
4 years as a
Oh,
fund. The
nice.
formal the
Oh,
formalized structure of our fund is 4 years.
so just pumping out like 5 million bucks a year of military wealth.
Yeah, and right. So the story is to get back to your original question. The story is, guy finds a house outside Savannah, Georgia, which is home near Fort Stewart, which is a really big base for us in the Army. Savannah is a great market as well. A lot of people moving in and out. It's got separate industries. It's not just dependent on the military base. It's got a port. Guy finds a house. He does a market mailer, or he does a mailer, cold outreach to a seller. Says, hey, I can buy your house for 100K in 10 days. The house is probably worth 110, 120 as is. He comes to Trophy Point. We lend him 90% of the purchase price. And then he also believes that, if he puts 25, 30K into fixing it up and upgrading it, he can sell for 200K based on the market comparables in that area. So we'll lend 100% of the rehab dollars in chunks. So we're in it as a loan side. We're in it for, let's say, for 115 to 125K from a loan perspective. He's in it for 10K of his own equity. So the total cost is 125. The loan is 115. He pays interest during the 3 month, 4 months that he's held the money. And then at month 5 or 6, he succeeds in selling it for 200K. And so
Whoa.
he's made basically $85,000 gross profit, not including commissions and closing costs, but 85,000 in gross profit after he pays off our loan.
Whoa.
That is
And
awesome.
people are still finding deals like
Yeah.
that in this market with rates high. And how are they finding them and how are you underwriting them?
So today it's harder. Don't get me wrong, it is harder. What our borrowers are doing is they've got systems in place to find undervalued deals and cold outreach sellers, right? And a lot of them are real estate professionals themselves as brokers as well, or they're even mortgage loan officers actually. Um, and so they're sending out mailers, they're doing text messages, they're doing even radio ads, they're doing a lot to attract sellers who want to sell quickly. And
So
there is
it's
a
like
segment.
systems. They have true systems in place to find these deals, scrape for deals. It's not just stumbling upon a property, down the street.
Yeah, that may have happened in 2021, 2022, or earlier. But nowadays, the successful folks have invested a lot into their marketing systems to attract cash offer type deals that they can buy at a discount.
That's a good point, I think, for our listeners, in that I get texted a lot, as I'm sure you do, Samir, you do, Joffrey. Like I'll wake up and I'll see like a Zillow link in my text messages, and people will be like, "What do you think? Like if I tried to flip this thing?" And it's like you're competing against some really savvy people out there. If it's been on the market for 100 days and no one else has done it, there may be other reasons why. Because if there's 100 people scraping data, making phone calls, and in Savannah, I don't know. It just seems like there's become a professional kind of um, industry of finding these things now instead of stumbling upon them, and so it just feels like it's getting harder and harder for those types of home runs. And I think that's a good example that it actually is.
That's a very valid point. And one little litmus test you can do on any industry actually is understand who the software providers are. So in our space on the flipping home side, single family, light multifamily side, there are software providers now that are specifically designed to help people find undervalued properties. PropStream is an example of that.
Mhm.
So you gotta like think about it. If there are software providers that are specifically designed to help service your industry or help you find deals in our case, in the lending side, not on the lending side, but on the flipping side, then that's a sign that there's maturity in that particular space,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means that there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people paying that subscription fee for that software provider, which means that all those people are your competition.
Wow.
So you've got to understand that there's competition and come up with an advantage that allows your offer or the way you present yourself to sellers to make them want to do business for you with you, and ignore all the other dudes that are hitting them up once a week, twice a week.
Is that also, are you seeing a lot of these undervalued properties being snatched up by institutional investors, like the huge funds that you read news stories about that are buying massive amounts of single family houses, or is that a different part of the market, like huge subdivisions and things?
My personal take is it's a different part of the market. The institutional buyers are real. They make up, depending on your market, anywhere from 15 to 25% of of the acquisitions. Their model though is more build to rent or own to rent. It's not so much flipping. I don't know if there's any like national level hedge fund organization, that has hundreds of millions of dollars that's in the business of flipping properties. I think it's still a very localized type of game.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But there are definitely a lot of hedge fund backed players, private equity backed players that have 1,500 to 10,000 homes that's part of a rental portfolio. Now that game has been going on for the last 10 years.
Okay. When you lend money, are you lending at 100% confidence that this is going to provide a return, or are you at a percentage that's lower than 100%?
How do you assess?
I'll tell
I,
you,
I think the better question is how do you look at the deal? Like, do you look at the person? Do you look at the deal? Do you look at? Take us through like how you actually like look at lending like your money out.
Yeah.
so there's two ways you can look at it. And some lenders do both. Some lenders only do look at one. So if you meet one private lender, you've only met one private lender because we all kind of approach it a little differently. But you can underwrite the asset and the economics of the asset relative to the comparables in the neighborhood or in the market. And what is your lending basis or exposure relative to the values, the average values in that neighborhood? And then you look at the person. Do they have experience? Do they have cash on hand? Are they liquid? Do they have partners? Are they a good risk in terms of like guaranteeing the loan? Do they have other assets that are at risk here? So you kind of take all those things in combination. And we lend on the basis of, would we want to own this property if the deal went south? And two, do we believe this person can pay us back, or at least pay the monthly interest over time? And the answer better be yes. Like it better be 100% going into it.
Mm-hmm.
Now we
And
understand
then,
problems happen, like contractor walks off the job, or materials cost ended up becoming higher than anticipated, or you missed the foundation issue, or you missed that a separate system has to be repaired. Those things happen. And in those cases, we work with our borrowers. A lot of cases, we suspend interest for a month or two until they get back on their feet, or we may even lend them more money if the deal justifies it to overcome that challenge.
that was going to be my next question. What type of like variables or surprises have really changed deals? It's probably mostly contractor based, but I could be wrong.
It's materials contractor based. It's very hard to find labor, good labor. Um, you've got contractors. If you don't know what you're doing with your contractors, you'll get taken. Um, the worst sort of scenarios are the ones where the contractors works on your project 1 day or 2 days a week, and then they move on to the next job, and they don't revisit your property for another week. Like that sort of merry-go-round thing with contractors is a no-go in my book, because time is money and you got to get this thing done. And so, newbies or rookies fall into that trap of allowing a contractor to only work 1, 2 days a week. They've really got to be very clear with their contractor on the expectations. And that can be a little rough, right? If you don't know what you're doing, it's tough to kind of like approach or confront somebody about that dynamic, but you just have to just gulp down and just say what's on your mind, tell you and trust your instinct that I need you to work on this for 2 weeks straight. I'm going to give you a little bit of extra money even to ensure that you're going to work on this for 2 weeks straight. I'm going to pay you in milestones. We're going to identify these milestones, and I'm going to pay you in accordance with the progress. I'm not going to pay you just because. I'm definitely not going to advance you tens of thousands of dollars just because.
Hmm. What what excites you most about, so let's say interest rates start to come downwards, whatever. I don't know if that impacts private money lending. I'm sure at some point it does, but what excites you most about like the year ahead, and what areas of the country are you starting to get excited about again?
So I'll answer your last question first. We're still excited about the Southeast United States because job growth and population growth are really strong down here. That's not going to. I don't think that's going to change. I'm not excited about California. I'm not excited about the Northeast as much because people are leaving those areas. They're cold. The governments up there have huge debt obligations. Like the political atmosphere up in the Northeast and California is not great, I think, long term for business. And so you're noticing over the last 2-3 years, many more people coming to Georgia, Texas, Florida, Tennessee, the Carolinas, and that's where we focus on. So that's not going to change. But I remain bullish on those parts of the country.
Is Virginia in there?
Yeah,
Hopefully.
Virginia's in there for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I've always thought Virginia is kind of in the South, but I could be wrong. It's
The
below the
problem
Mason-Dixon
with
line.
the problem with Virginia is the high price points. So in the
Northern
Southeast,
Virginia. Yeah.
yeah, especially Northern Virginia, like here in the Southeast, like Atlanta, for example, we have the benefit of being able to expand further and further and further, right? So our cost per square foot is a lot lower than the areas that are highly dense, where the only way you could go up is, postage stamp lots, or you go vertical.
Yeah.
And the cost to build, the average cost to own or build, however you want to look at it, that average cost per square foot is higher in those areas. And so Northern Virginia, you're talking average houses of 500 to 700K or more.
Yeah.
I I don't, from a lending perspective, I don't want to lend on that because this is my own balance sheet, right? And also, I'm the largest investor in our fund, and I have $5 million of my own money in the fund, and I take the first loss
Whoa.
on any bad deal or bad decision I make. That's my promise to the investors. So I'm really, me, Dave, and Nick are my partners, and their money also included in that. Like, we really eat it if we screw this up. And so we like taking more sensible risks, lower dollar risks in areas like Georgia and Texas, where the average price point is very manageable relative to our $60 million fund. If I were to get into California, I think we'd have to be $100 million because the average house in California median home price is 500 and not to a million, right? And I don't want one loan being 1% of my fund if I only have a $60 million fund.
Hmm. Can you talk a little bit about, and I don't want to be cliche here, but like the teamwork aspect of running a company with two other professionals, how you guys originally, all decided to work together, how you divide labor, because a lot of people that listen are going to end up starting companies in the future, I think, with other people. So how did you set all this up? How did you vet each other? All that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, Nick, and we had another partner as well who's since left us, but Dave, Nick, and I have come a long way. I used to get them in early deals that actually lost them money. So if you can imagine getting your classmates into a deal and they lost 5,000, 10, 15, $50,000, and they still want to do business with you afterward. I think that says a lot about
That's
our
awesome. Yeah,
our
that's awesome.
dynamic. I'm grateful to them in the sense that they still believed in the vision of what we were trying to accomplish with Trophy Point because we wanted a vehicle for ourselves that would throw off income for us that would allow us to quit our day jobs. And in Nick
Yeah.
and Dave's case, they actually left the military at 15 years of service, which is a lot. As you guys know, a
Yeah.
20-year
Wow.
retirement is very, very attractive. And they left at 15 years of service to do this with me full time.
Wow.
Um, and I think they believe in the mission. So like, there's that aspect of like being able to motivate your team and help them understand like where you're headed and being very clear about it and owning up to mistakes as they come along the way. And the second part of it that's helped us a lot is like we all have individual strengths. I am not a good operations guy. Nick Cosmas is probably one of the best operations guys out there that I know. So it's a natural fit. I can raise money pretty good. Like I've done it before. I know how to raise money. I've raised it in the hundreds of millions at this point. that's not a skill or that's not a desire of Nick and Dave necessarily to play that game, because it's a different type of game and it requires a different sort of personality makeup to do that. And then Dave builds houses, and Dave has a really strong real estate background on the single family, multifamily side. And so I think we got lucky in the sense that all of our skills align in great ways to kind of put together Trophy Point and offer a product not only to our borrowers but also to our investors, right? Like we've got 150 borrowers, and then we've also got 170 investors on either end, right? So we serve a lot of masters in this business that we have, and our unique skill set is aligned to do all of that. And what helps on the vetting side is, did this person do this stuff independently before the partnership, right? So Dave and Nick independently are individually wealthy because they've been flipping houses and own real estate before we kind of got together as well, right? So that mattered a lot. If they had not done that, I don't think they would be with me or with Trophy Point at this particular stage that we're in.
I have another question, if you don't mind. Well, it's a podcast, so you're not allowed to mind. I'm just going to keep asking.
Okay, good.
So I think a lot of people would hear some of these general numbers from the podcast so far. Okay, 5 million of your own money, hotels, investments. Why don't you just stop and retire? Have you started a treadmill that you know have to continue running on, or is this your dream? Are you chasing something huge? You know, what is continuing to push you? You're about to be a father, you have obviously a beautiful wife. What is continuing to drive you instead of just stopping and cooling down?
So the first piece of advice I'd give, actually, which doesn't really answer your question, but I'll say it anyway, is if you're a real estate professional, you have to keep your expenses low. Like I've never bought a new car, actually, even though I could buy several cars, I think, at this point. One a month if I really wanted to. Like I don't. You've got to keep your fixed expenses low. So like I don't live in a very expensive house. I don't. I drive a used car that's 10 years old. I don't. I don't have expenses that, or even nearly even 10K a month, actually, between me and my wife. Um, you've got to be, because this again goes back to the cycles and being able to survive. You've got to live a very modest lifestyle. Um, Now I have a personal assistant that helps a lot, but she's like really a business expense in many ways because she's supporting the business operations in that regard. But the total, my mortgage and living expenses between me and my wife, we don't have a kid yet, but right now we spend maybe $6,000 a month total. That includes our $3,400 mortgage and the $700, $800 HOA fee that we pay for our condo. We don't have car payments. We have military insurance because I'm a reservist still. So our insurance is $250 a month. Like I'm still in the reserves because of, the insurance actually. Like obviously I don't want to serve, but then there's, that aspect as well. If we made 75 to 80K between me and her for the next couple of years, we'd be fine. Honestly, but my wife's a doctor as well, in case you didn't know. So like we have a lot of excess income that's going back into reinvesting. But we are
I think
prepared.
I want to be a Patel kid. Are you guys adopting? Because I'll come move in. I'll keep expenses relatively low. My wife is not the same, but
Well, I think I have some serious thoughts on how to raise children. Obviously, I'm gonna get to try those things out, so I don't want to be too presumptuous in telling people what those things are, having not been a parent. But I think frugalness and understanding the value of money is going to be part of the education that I give my child, and then he can decide whatever he wants to do with that. Um, but then going back to your other question of like, what's the goal? I work now. I guess theoretically, I could stop working for the rest of my life if I really, really wanted to. I find that an atrocious thought because West Point, the government, my military service, all these things have kind of have been put in motion by the American taxpayer, really, to turn me into a really good leader or to be a better or a more effective leader. So like I've been lucky with the mentors I've had, the experiences I've had. It goes all the way back to the academy. I've been very lucky to take advantage of a lot of opportunities, and I don't think sitting on the couch with my hands in my pants all day playing video games is a good use of the investments that essentially the American taxpayer has provided me. Um, at West Point, I found my voice. Like we all don't. We all when we're young, you don't really know where you're going to head in life. But I was lucky that West Point indirectly gave me a voice and gave me a direction to go toward, and taught me how to like manage people and how to get shit done in spite of the stress and all the other random things that academy life throws at you. I was able to like embrace that, and it helped me find my the way I want to do business. So the goal is to keep growing sensibly. The goal is to lead, whether it's elected office, I don't know, influence politics or influence national level leadership. I don't know, but that's kind of the direction I want to go to. And I need assets to support.
Oh, that's cool. That's super cool. I never even thought about that. Once you get to a certain level, your voice actually could get bigger.
Yeah, and I want to maintain a degree of independence and being independent. So I'm not beholden to other special interests to to engage in that, right? I want to be able to come with my own genuine independent voice and run things the way I see fit. And I'm not saying I want to be an egomaniac about it, but I trust my ability to get things done, and I want to do it in the way I see fit because that's the fun. I mean, that's really the fun in it. Is like you come up with an idea, you align the resources, you find the people, you motivate the people, and you get yourself going in a direction, and you can accomplish a lot through other people, and that's kind of like where I'm at, where I want to head toward. So like not working is not not on the table at all. And then honestly, what kind of example would I be setting to my future children of a father just sits around, playing golf all day or not? I want to see my kids, not too much, but I want my kids to see me struggle a little bit. I want them to see me engaged in campaigns of business or politics or leadership or whatever, right? Like, because I learned that from my father. Like, my father was very strong in the community. Every Friday night, we'd have our community, which is like a quasi-religious organization, like kind of like church. But every Friday night, I would watch him be part of board meetings and sit around in a circle talking about issues. Like, who can we help? This so-and-so had this issue. They had a death in the family. Like, how can we help that person? Like, I got to see him do that. He never had to do any of that, given his job at IBM. But those things left a really strong imprint in who I am. And I want to continue that tradition.
Wow.
That is awesome.
I mean, the podcast could end right there. I want to go like, I
Literally.
feel like so lazy today now. I took my time on a jog this morning and I'm like, I need some like Samir quotes on
I
my
know
door
Samir has me
because
amped up for sure. What's
Samir,
what? Oh, go ahead, David.
what is there a minimum check size for investing in your firm, or how do you know if you're a good potential investor? As we wrap this up, we only have a few seconds left, but if
Yeah.
people are out there and they're like, "Oh, Samir is awesome. I met Dave at the summit. I'd love to be involved on the investor side. Maybe I'm not equipped to be, a vehicle for that investment yet, but whatever."
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. We're always looking for investors. And we have 170 now, and I've deliberately kept the minimum investment low to $25,000,
Hmm.
which earns an 8% yield, which I think is a fantastic yield given how we've
Yeah, wow.
stacked the deck to mitigate risk in sorts of ways. Like, we don't lend too much in terms of LTV. I've got $5 million of my own risk. We ask for the borrowers to put 10% down. Like, we've done 700 plus deals across $160 million of loans, and we haven't lost a single dollar on
Whoa.
principal on any of our loans.
That's
That is
insane.
crazy.
So anyway, so all that means for the investors, like, we've created a very safer product, and to get in is 25,000. And I think we want to attract investors, younger investors that will add to it over time. And so 25,000 earns an 8% yield. It's paid quarterly. It's backed against my guarantee, or at least the money that I put into the fund. Um, and yeah, it's a great way to
See,
get exposed to real
right
estate.
there, Joffrey, right there is what you and I were talking about of when we were a midshipman with our career starter loan, 30K.
Yeah.
If we had just known that we could have invested in service academy graduate things like this that were producing, that's a great return. I mean, how
That is.
cool would that have been able to weaponize your career starter loan back then? And then, one of the cool things about being an investor in something is you gain a little bit of access to the founders. At least you get
Mm-hmm.
to hop on calls with them once a quarter, you see email updates from them or whatever. That's worth a couple percent too. Anyway, Samir, You're awesome. I could talk to you all day long. You've been a
Absolutely.
huge and a beneficial addition to my life. I consider you a friend, which is, a huge blessing for me. So thank you so much. I know you're about to have an addition to your family, so you've 50 different things you could be doing, but you took an hour for Joffrey and I. So thank you so much. How can people best contact you? What is the best, easiest way?
Yeah, so just go to trophypointcapital.com. That's the investor side of the house. If you want to borrow money from us, then you would go to trophypointlending.com. And my email is samir@trophypointinvestment.com. And so my phone number is 404-723-8410. So you're welcome to text me, call me anytime. I like to make myself available as much as possible to investors and or people that want to do business with us on the borrowing side. So hit me up. And then I'll say this, I'll end with this. I appreciate what you guys are doing as well, because the resources that you're providing, the platform that you're creating for the naval side of the house, through the Blue and Gold Summit, through this podcast, like you're also spending your time investing back into your community, which are things that I didn't necessarily have back then. And so like, I hope this hour provided some nuggets of value to your listeners, and it speeds up the process of getting into business for yourself. But I applaud you guys for taking the time to investing in this thing, because it's a thankless task sometimes, because you're putting up your own time, your own money, when you could be reinvesting that back into your own direct businesses on lending or buying multifamily. But you're not. You're doing this, and I applaud you guys and I admire you for that.
Yeah, really appreciate that,
Appreciate it.
Samir. Yeah, the summits are definitely brutally expensive, and
I'm aware.
but yes, sponsors like you are just huge, just huge. I don't have enough positive words to say, but hopefully we can see you again in April. And yeah, Joffrey, anything else? But thanks so much, Samir. Give my best to your soon to be grown fam.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, nothing else. That was an awesome episode. I appreciate your time. Appreciate everything that you do, and we'll be in contact because I'm thinking about doing a flip. So it'll
Yeah,
be
let me
okay
know.
if you
Yeah.
deny me.
Okay. I'll say that we're not the cheapest on the block, but we are the most reliable. Like, people pay us a higher rate of interest in this world because we always close on time. We've never missed a loan closing. That wasn't our fault, at least. And so you get the certainty that the offer you're making to your seller, that you can actually take that to the bank if we give you a term sheet.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Which goes a long
cheapest
way.
is rarely the way to go, I
It's
think.
dangerous.
you
It's dangerous.
you will
Cheap is
get
dangerous.
cheapest if you want cheapest. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.